Welcome back. I've got Ted Santos on the line. Ted, how are you today?
I'm pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm really looking forward to this conversation for a while, so I'm really glad to have you on the show. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this very important conversation.
Okay, great. First, I want to say thank you for having me and looking forward to this. There are lots of places I can start. So, to make sure I'm not all over the place, where would you like me to start?
Let's say, just a brief background about your organization, how it came to be, and then, of course, we'll talk about being disruptive. And everybody's like, "What do you mean by that?" Don't worry, friends. You'll hear it soon enough. So, why don't you share a bit about your business, what you're working on? If you want to, throw in anything that kind of
Mhm.
led you to that, by all means.
Sure. So, 20 years ago, 2005, I started Turnaround Investment Partners, and it was very much focused on working with companies that could be distressed, but also I liked companies that were growing so fast they couldn't handle it. And those companies were often on the path to being distressed. They just didn't know it yet. So those were the two types of companies that I liked working with. Uh, I have a background as chief operating officer in two different companies. One was translations, foreign languages. The other one was transportation logistics. And transportation was growing faster than it could handle, uh, bursting at the seams, losing clients, but top line was still going well and was able to transform the culture and then look at some new products and services. And then with the translations, that was interesting because I knew nothing about the translation industry. I speak Spanish and Portuguese, and I lived abroad for a number of years, and I lived abroad on my own dime. I wasn't an expat. So I had an understanding of culture and all that. um, that company was losing revenue for 3 years. It was declining revenue for 3 years, and the industry itself was growing like a hockey stick. So you have to work hard to have declining revenues in a booming industry. So that was a turnaround. Within 9 months, revenues were up 69%, 68%. And I also looked at new services, and the benefit of not being from the industry allowed me to have a more objective perspective of it. And one of the things that I saw that was missing, and the customer didn't even know how to ask for it, was websites were starting to become pretty popular. And so translating the language is great. I want to put a website in Spanish and Mandarin and Japanese, but how do you translate the culture? So that was you could say, disruptive in a sense to the industry because no one had figured out how to do it. And working with translators to do that, just being a translator to translate an industry didn't mean you could translate the culture. So I had to look for needles in the haystack to be able to do that. Um, so yeah, I have a background in travel. I have a background of being disrupted in my own life, and I have a company that supports organizations working with CEOs, mostly middle market companies, CEOs and other executives, to turn around and put in structures and transform a culture that becomes a high performance organization.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And it brought to mind a couple things. One, when you went into, the translation business, not knowing anything about it, it reminded me when I first went into the healthcare industry, running a
Mhm.
healthcare organization, and I never ran a healthcare organization before.
Right.
I didn't know what an autoclave was, and here I am, having to require or recruit physicians and clinicians and handle medical supplies and navigate a brand new clinic in an underserved area. But you learn quick because you really have no choice. You're just like, okay,
Right.
let's go to it. And I love how you said, that outside point of view was very helpful. And I think a lot of organizations really need to think about that because for years I've seen, thankfully in my career, switching around and doing different things. I sometimes I do bring in an outside viewpoint on things, and I think that's where organizations often kind of limit themselves because they say, well, we just want people that have worked in the industry. And I'll use a real life example, and not to pick on event planners or different things because I do a lot of speaking and whatnot. And in many cases, when I'm reaching out to speak in events, like, no, we just want people that work within our organization. It's like, well, you're not bringing any new information in that. You're just basically regurgitating the same thing over again, and no one's going to grow on that. But you have to say it nicely to them. Be like, okay, I understand. That's how you want to approach it. But getting those outside viewpoints can bring those aha moments where you can see some things that'll actually flush out. And the second thing I want to highlight and commend you for is the culture side of things, because when you're dealing with organizations that come from different parts of the world, different backgrounds and experiences like that, the cookie cutter North American approach is not necessarily
Mm,
going to work in Indonesia or in the Philippines or even Eastern Europe or Western Europe for that matter. And that's something you have to recognize. The last healthcare clinic that I ran, we were fortunate enough to have 16 different nations represented in our organization. That was, it happened naturally and organically. I didn't say, okay, I need to hire a physician from India, okay?
right.
And but then we put them in the next room next to somebody that was from Pakistan. India and Pakistan have not always got along, and
Right.
I'm like, how's this gonna work? Should we move them? And we talked to them both, and like, no, they were good, and they would have conversations with each other. I'm like, huh, is this how world peace happens? We talk? Oh, that's an interesting concept. We may want to expand this a little bit further than two exam rooms here. But again, it's understanding that's like, okay, there's some differences, and let's flush those out, and let's see how we can create an environment where people feel that they can make their contribution. They don't feel that they're on an island. They don't feel isolated and alone because
Right.
maybe they're different, quote unquote, from everybody else that is working there. You want them to feel included. And how does that, and the best way to approach it from my standpoint is you ask them, how can we make you feel included? And say, well, we have to include you. So here's the policy on how to be inclusive. No, 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 no. And I'm not picking on all the people that, work in that type of space, but it's a lot easier, I find, to just ask them what can we do to make you feel more included?
Right.
It'll save a lot of time in policy writing. Believe me, it does. So let's talk about disruption. And I know you have an amazing system that you use and have developed that really helps organizations, kind of, turn the tables a little bit on things. Because as we were talking briefly before I hit record, uh, I think a lot of organizations, they get comfortable, and when they get comfortable, if you're not growing, you're dying is a phrase you hear a lot. And I think that's what happens with a lot of organizations that do end up going out of business is they get comfortable, or like the work you've done. They're growing like crazy, but they're bleeding money out the back end, and
Mm,
you're like,
exactly.
and so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So you and I think the same. I often say, I ask people, what's one sign that a company is in trouble? And they give me all kinds of answers, and I say they're successful. You're in trouble because we're good at this, and just look at all the typewriter companies that were successful, and they didn't transform into a computer company. So you were saying before, I only want people from my industry. Most disruptive technology comes from outside your industry. So if you're not aware of that, then you are creating blinders within your organization. Your whole entire industry is doing that. So uh, I created the disruptive leadership model because I saw personally in my personal life how disruption can often bring the best out of people. I've spoken about this probably too much, but at 6 years old, I saw my mother run with broken legs. There was a car accident 100 yards from home. She ran home to get my father, and he comes with his cousin and carry us to the hospital. And later, I learned she had broken legs. Except I saw her with my own eyes run home, and so now I have this conversation in my head about how human beings have something they don't know how to gain access to, and I'm going to gain access to it. So, becoming an athlete, studying human behavior as a child to understand this. Then at 21, both my parents die. I'm the oldest of four, and there's still this run with broken legs. And I have this great understanding of human behavior, and I need to coach my siblings up. I need to pull more out of them than they know how to get out of themselves. And those two things, where I saw my life was disrupted and I saw my mother run with broken legs. This is phenomenal. And then when my parents die, I'm 21, my brother's 19, and my sisters are 12 and 16. I watched them do things that you would never expect someone that age to do. So now I'm sort of set up with this foundation that people have this possibility. And then when I go into organizations, I disrupt the culture. Hey, I know this is the way we've been doing it forever. Uh, this is the way we're going to do it. And you get employees who say, then we're going to be out of business if we do it that way. And so you coach them through, you get more out of them than they know how to get out of themselves. And we now have a culture that's transforming, and the bar is here instead of down here. And now whoever gets hired has to meet this bar, not the old bar. So when I started consulting people, an advisor to CEOs, I have this in my head, and I'm working with people to disrupt the way they think. Because one of the things that I see that happens in business, we have a lot of Monday morning quarterbacks, and they all can tell you how the Steve Jobs of the world did it with luck, right place, the right time. But we don't see that we've had some phenomenal disruptive leaders throughout time. John D. Rockefeller Sr. and Standard Oil, he disrupted the oil industry. People are charging $5 for a gallon of kerosene, and you had to walk to the place. And uh, Rockefeller says, "Well, we're going to get it for, I don't know, $2 or less, and I'm going to deliver it to your doorstep." And so he obliterates the industry, and he buys his competition. He negotiates with Vanderbilt to get a better price on. There were so many things that he did and passed the savings on to the customer that he disrupted the industry. Howard Hughes in the airplane. There are Henry Ford in the car. $1,500 car in 1900, and by 1927 he's charging 274 or $47 for an automobile because he said, "I want most people to own an automobile." And by the way, do you know what company was Ford's the first automobile company he had?
I should know this being from Detroit, but I forget. Remind me.
Cadillac.
Uh-huh.
And
Yep.
he walked away because his investors wanted him to make a luxury automobile. And he said, "No, my commitment is to create a car that most households can afford." And he accomplished that by 1960. So, but he disrupted the industry. There are a lot of car manufacturers that didn't make it. I think by 1920, there were about 100 different automobile companies just in the US only. And as we see, most didn't survive. So disrupting your organization, disrupting the industry, uh, gives you access to untapped markets. It gives you access to revenues that you would have never had. It allows you to grow your organization exponentially. But one of the challenges that I saw, and this is why I created a model, is really, I call it a technology, it's a mindset technology. Oftentimes, your people are not very good at navigating through disruption. They want to keep things comfortable the way they are. I'm an expert in this. Why would you ask me to do something that possibly could make me obsolete? And where you could say we're looking at this in AI today. People are concerned that make them obsolete. So disruptive leadership is helping people uncover blind spots, a mindset that derails them, and then be able to invent a future from the future as opposed to just taking the past and make it more better or different.
Yeah, AI is one of those things that I think a lot of people are afraid of. But then I remember when the dot-com era kicked in, a lot of people were afraid of, okay, is this going to close my storefront? And I'm like, Not necessarily, but
Right.
you need to adapt, and you're opening up opportunities, or even we'll pick on the speakers like we did a moment ago. The speaking industry during the pandemic. A lot of people are going, "Oh no, what are we going to do? We're
Right.
used to having events. Well, now you do the virtual events, and then all of a sudden, once they fumbled through learning the technology, they opened the doors to a new avenue where a lot of organizations now, yes, they you have in person again, but they kept the virtual option for people that couldn't make the trek to Las Vegas, for example, but
Right.
they could still sign up and just catch a few sessions virtually, which increased the number of people attending your event, which is the whole idea. You want more people, and you have a capacity limit in in a speaking engagement, and like, I'm not going to mention the location. It was Houston. I gave an event a speech, and it was an HR event, ironically, at an event, and my session got in trouble because there were more people in the room than the fire department wanted to have in
Wow.
the room. It was one of those things where I'm like, yeah, you're speaking, you're in the zone, you kind of look around, all of a sudden I'm looking, it's like, why is everybody sitting on the floor in the back? And I'm like, then I look around, I look, kind of pan the whole room, like, because this room is completely full and overflowing. Okay, it's like, well, maybe next time they need to book a larger room for a session like
Exactly.
mine, I guess. Which I was, thankful that that many people wanted to hear me talk. But on the flip side of it, it was like, oh, okay, the capacity. That's why, virtual side of things, all those people wouldn't have to
Ex-
sit on the dirty
Right.
carpet, and they could basically watch it from the comfort of their chair or their couch or wherever else. But I think
Exactly.
it's and you mentioned something a moment ago that and I think a lot of it has to do, obviously mindset is critical in this, but also for a lot of people, that amygdala comes into play, and they go, oh, the fear starts kicking in. Oh, we're going to change things because they get comfortable in doing what they're doing, and they get really good at it. And like, oh yeah, I'm crushing. I'm doing really good. And you're like, okay, well let's do something different. Let's turn this upside down, and let's not necessarily break it, but let's try something different. And a lot of people are like, oh, we can't do that. But the innovators, the companies that have grown to be Fortune 500 level, um, have done that. They've shifted some things because you kind of hit a plateau. And many organizations, and most actually do, they hit a plateau based on their capacity, the people they have on board, skill set, you name it. And sometimes you break some things up. And I remember real quick, an internet market research firm that I worked for. And I remember I was one of the early employees there, and we got up to about 250 employees, and then they let go 10% of the staff. Now, first thought was, we're going under, they're closing up, got to dust up their resume and let's get that out again. But that wasn't the case. They needed to make those adjustments because they were forward thinking, going, okay, we need to level up our skill set in these other areas in order for us to grow. Well, now they're, several thousand employees, international,
Wow.
public traded. They grew. But you grow, adjust, grow, adjust, grow, adjust, grow, and that's what they did. And now it wasn't fun to see a lot of your colleagues, especially, the early days, the people that you kind of built things with, be, shown the door, but, it made sense, and thankfully, I recognized it, was able to survive all of those adjustments.
Mm.
And but it was still one of those, okay, because I went into it, it's like, what do you need me to do? And learned if I didn't know how to do it, let me learn how to do that.
Exactly.
Okay. And just, make yourself continually grow. And as an employee going into work with that mindset, even if it's an organization that doesn't necessarily currently anyway have this vision of being completely different down the road, continually investing in your knowledge and yourself, whether it's going to benefit your company, which it will, or if it's going to benefit you down the road, is something that's basically constantly being disruptive of yourself. And I think that's why your system is so important, not just for organizations, but for individuals, because it will help you continue to grow. Never stop learning. Just keep learning something new every day, even if it's minute. It will make such a gigantic difference in your life. You may not see it immediately, but believe me, you will look back and go, boy, am I glad I learned how to do that because that's really coming in handy now.
Well, and sometimes to learn something that has nothing to do with what you already know, it's a big reason you want to effectively and strategically delegate to your people. So what it does is it creates a learning organization as you unload things, and I shouldn't say unload, you strategically delegate to your direct reports, then they strategically delegate to their direct reports, and everyone's learning. So if I, as the CEO, delegate something, now I can go focus on creating something that didn't exist. I We live in a world, and people think the days of Copernicus are gone. Like Copernicus says, hey, the world is not the earth is not the center of the universe. The sun is, and all the planets go around. Oh, this guy's insane, heresy, get rid of him. And that's what they did. Louis Pasteur told the doctors to wash their hands, and they said, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not a medical doctor. We know how to deliver babies. Well, over 40% of women who go to the hospital to have a baby don't survive. At some point, they don't survive. So you're passing germs. And they said, let me get this straight. These little tiny microscopic things that we can't see are what's infecting women. He's like, yes, you got it. And they said, you're crazy. You're an idiot. But so there are people who have perspectives, and it's not always learning. They are inventing knowledge. They're inventing a future that didn't exist, and it's what the college and history books will write down for you to learn. But they invented that. Even Steve Jobs having a touch screen. Someone said to him, "Hey, Steve, people are not accustomed to touching the screen to make their phone work." And he said, they'll get used to it. But he made that up. And maybe it existed somewhere, but it wasn't commercially available to the consumer. So now you see this is common. You buy your cell phone, it's very common to touch the screen. In fact, you watch children go to a computer when they get old enough and they want that, they've been playing with an iPad since, before they could talk. And now they expect everything to function that way. So yes, learning is important, but also there are people who invent or they create these new possibilities. And if you are a leader, you don't have to be the CEO, but you're a leader in an organization. Part of your job, especially if you're the CEO, is to invent these new possibilities. A big part of your job as a CEO is to intentionally create problems for the organization to solve. So when John D. Rockefeller is walking around his plant and he asks the guy who's soldering the barrel to put the oil into, he says, how many drops of solder do you put on that? Oh, 47. Uh, what happens if you put 35? And the guy says, he comes back and says, 35, it leaks, but at 39, it's solid. That's $500,000 in the 1800s that he saved. Um, and his competitors had no idea he was doing these kinds of things. And that's how he was able to pass on savings. So, uh, what I'm really getting at is altering the way people see themselves, the way they see the world, their industry is extremely important for an individual to be able to create this new future from the future. But you also have to deal with your blind spots. So I've worked with a CEO who, at 5 years old, his and he had other siblings. He wasn't the oldest, but he just happened to be the only sibling in the car in the back seat, and his parents are driving, and his parents get into an argument, and his father says something so harsh that the mother gets out the car, and and he's 5 now, and he's like, "How dare you, Dad, do that to Mom?" Like, he's 5 years old. Well, what can he do to his father? So he jumps, he opens the door, runs out of the car, runs across the street, doesn't look at traffic, and he's there to save his mom. So that one incident shaped him into being a hero and a bully. So the way he leads his company is I recklessly go out and I'm the hero salesman. I have all the best sales, even though I have a sales force. Um, but I just happen to be a 6'5" guy who uses that to bully people and to intimidate them. And so I'm going to lead, and it all came down to that one event. So what that does, it makes it difficult for him to hire someone who may be smarter or more talented than he is, because he's so accustomed to using sort of a force bully leadership approach, an intimidation approach, that someone who's really talented will not want to be micromanaged that way. So there are constraints. Even though the company is growing, the way he leads is constrained by an event that happened at 5, and it's a blind spot. He doesn't even see that. So once people are able to reverse engineer that and really distinguish it, they now have a choice. Do I want to continue being the 5-year-old that either has to be a hero or a bully, or do I want to be a guy who leads an organization and has top talent that can grow the organization exponentially from where we are? And then that also opens the door for him to be able to look at new possibilities for the organization. What are things that we've never done? Who are our non-customers, these untapped markets? And so it opens the space for that to happen. So those are the two things that I look at, and I'm what makes it become like a Louis Pasteur conversation is most people would say, "Oh, that guy just had a big ego," and this may be tough for some people. There's really no ego involved in a human being, and I know it's what we've been told for generations. But when you subscribe to an ego, what you're really doing is creating kind of a victim mindset. And I've asked brain surgeons, I've asked medical doctors, where in the brain is the ego? And they say, well, there is no ego in there. There's no place in the brain for that. So what you're saying is there's this little guy in your head that's making you be a bully or telling you to go out and be the hero and run across the street. So at a young age, we make all kinds of decisions and we don't realize that it sticks with us. We think that's just who we are and we become stuck with it. We have no way of distinguishing it. But once you can distinguish it, you're no longer stuck with it. You have a choice. You can be responsible. So at 5, you say, my dad was a bully and I'll never let that happen again. So the way you stop people from being a bully is you bully them, right? So um, and I because I saved my mom, I'm a hero and I'm a hero for life. And that's the way you do. But this is not an ego. It's what you said to yourself. It's how you manage the situation at a young age. And now it's just part of your neural system, your neural pathways, and that's when certain things happen, like if the guy ever meets a guy who reminds of him of his dad, he's in conflict automatically and doesn't know why. But it's that one situation. It's not like it happened over the course of years. That one day can alter your life forever. And I've seen this over and over. Every human being has an event that shapes who they are and it creates blind spots. So being able to be disruptive is also being able to shed or unlearn many of these things that put us in a trap, and it makes it difficult to get out.
Yeah, definitely. It reminds me of so many different things. And I identify as a reformed people pleaser because, my parents, there's a book, Disease to Please by Harriet Breaker, came out in 2000. Amazing book. I highly recommend a lot of books, that one in particular, because it was eye-opening for me. And I went, ooh, yeah, it's like I see in, those life moments and, working with people that are recovering from burnout or, they're in a toxic situation at work. It's like, okay, well, what's your part in this? I don't have any
And
part in it. Like, Really? I think you do, and you, of course you have to frame it because you don't want to lose them right out of the gate. But sometimes you got to confront them and make them rethink some things because those blind spots can be pretty thick walls, and they don't want to look around them. And yeah, I love how you shared, the ego thing. It's like, yeah, where's the ego? And it's not there. It's that victimhood that a lot of people unfortunately cling to. It's like, well, where's that getting you? Are you where you want to
Exactly.
be? And a lot of people are
Exactly.
like, no, I don't want to be this way. I'm like, okay, well then don't. What do you mean don't. And like, yeah, okay, there's some work that needs to be done, but just
Right.
if you don't do that, and, when you were mentioning, about the bully and the victim, it kind of reminded me of a recent story. Have a puppy, he's 5 months old now, and
Okay.
he, did the kind of the victim and hero kind of thing at the same time. He got underneath the table, and there was a charging cable for my phone underneath there, and he was being quiet, which is usually a red flag for a puppy, but he was under the table. I'm like, hey, he's usually not doing anything. All of a sudden, he chewed on it, and of course it was plugged into a power, so it sparked.
Oh
So
wow.
he started to bark at it and stuff, and we found it. And then he was prancing around. Look at, I'm the hero. I saved you. I saved you from a sparking wire. I'm like, dude, you caused the sparking wire. It's like, don't give. You're not getting the cape, buddy. No, no. Thank you for barking and bringing to our attention. I appreciate that, but you're the one that cause and effect. It's like I need to be a hero. So chop, look, I'm a hero. And so that's a silly example, but in a way, it's humans pull that all the time, and it's like punch somebody in the nose and they're bleeding, and they hand them a tissue. Here's a tissue to stop the bleeding for you. Like you caused this, but yeah, no, it's a
Right.
great story. So before you wrap up, you'd mentioned in the pre-show that you asked permission, and I granted. It's like how to be disruptive for me. So feel free to share thoughts, ideas, questions, whatever comes to mind.
Well, I often hear so many people talk about the ego and the unconscious, and my commitment in my work is for people to be 100% responsible for what they say to themselves. Otherwise, what we're left with is my ego made me do it. It was just an unconscious thought. So, the guy who jumps out of the car at 5, we could say as he gets older, or he's just unconsciously dealing with people that way. He doesn't know he's doing it, but he has no distinctions for it. And when you can distinguish that moment in time, and we're not talking about over the course of 5 or 20 years, it's over the course of seconds. His mother gets out the car, and in seconds, he responds, and he creates this entire identity around the guy who's, I wish I could do something to my dad, but I'm only 5. My dad's a bully, so I know how to stop bullies, be a bully, and then to save my mom, I'm a hero. So he's got these two strategies, tactics to the way he survives in the world, and he can justify why he has to be a bully. You don't understand the way this person is. Let me tell you, that's what they. It's not that it's unconscious, it's just from an event. So we have all these explanations, or that's just his conscious, his unconscious, his ego. It's even the amygdala. Even though I get it, the amygdala plays a role, but it doesn't. The brain is not intelligent enough to tell you what to do. It's in response to what you say to yourself. You have to have a conversation. You have to say, "This reminds me of." Now, you may not even hear yourself saying it, but this is happening again. I'll never let that happen again. And I have it, just like I figured out at 5 how to resolve it. I was successful, and I'm going to stop it again. And it may not be the same thing that's happening, but it it appears to be similar. And so we become the 5-year-old who has to protect, kind of defend and protect ourselves.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I've learned. I wish I would have learned it a whole lot earlier in life, but at least I learned it. And it's a constant reminder for me is whenever there's a situation that is not going, quote unquote, the way that I would like it, like, okay, what is, and I sometimes have, and even to the point where I'll write this down if I'm forgetting it a lot. It's like, okay, what's my role in this? Um,
Mm,
I did I cause this? No, but am I responsible for it?
right,
Yes, I
right.
am responsible. And that's, a leader sometimes forgets that. It's like you are responsible for everything that happens in your organization. Even though you're not the one that, you know, blew up the data center with, some bad patches and now nothing's working. Yeah, you didn't do that, but you're responsible for it. And yeah, is it fair? And, yeah, we that's a completely different argument, and I again that bleeds into it's not fair. Okay, victim card. Okay, great. Don't
Right.
just own it. Because I think too in closing, you have to be open to learning and this is something I see with a lot of people, including myself. Sometimes we don't want to look within, and that's where the answers are. You got to look within. Obviously, your experiences and stuff are going to kind of shape things, but you will also have the choice to say, "Yeah, I've done it this way forever. I can do it this other way." It's like I don't want to live here anymore. Okay, then don't live here anymore. Move. Um, yes, I know there's certain things based on society, cost, first and last, moving company, all those things. Getting your driver's license changed over. There's steps involved, but those are just procedural things. Don't get hung up on all of those. Those are, you understand, okay, which is the way to get this done? Okay, well, then you do it. I think a lot of times we put in that emotion, the self-doubt, all the different things that come in. But again, those are all excuses. And again, they all kind of tie back to that victim mentality thing. And it's like, no, don't. You're champion. Okay, what do champions do? Okay, they lost the game. Are they happy about it? I certainly hope not. What do they go, okay, what do I need to do in order to win next time? And they're constantly looking for ways to improve. We see it in
Right.
athletes, we see it in sport. We see those teams that couldn't break through, finally did. I think of Michael Jordan and the Bulls. Took them a while to get to the point where they were, and all of a sudden they just decided to start winning all the time. And I know the people in Chicago miss those days. It's like I know a lot of people do. Those teams that have never won it, they really well, they can't miss it because they've never had it. But they imagine why they miss it. But it will happen. But I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn and you can find me on my website, which is turnaroundip.com. And IP is like intellectual property.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So love this conversation. Made my brain grow a bit. Really appreciate that. So thanks again for being on the show.
No, thanks. My pleasure. Thank you.